to talk about, Sergio basically, with that little bite-sized introduction, started to nip into my general presentation about the importance of fundamental movement skills and movement skills in general. I'd just like to put a kind of a health warning on this. This is very much my take on it. My take on it as a practitioner, my take on it as a physical education teacher of children for a number of years, a sports development officer, and a sports-specific coach, mainly in latter days in the sport of volleyball. So I wouldn't say this is the definitive. This is the BN and end all of multi-skills, fundamental movement skills coaching. But hopefully it'll be an interesting take on it, an interesting angle on it, and it'll give you food for thought. So this is essentially what I'm going to be looking to do as I just close off people looking at me so I can see my screen. Just quickly go through some little bit of theory in terms of why fundamental movement skills, multi-skills approach to coaching is important. Just to build on a little bit on what Sergio started to talk about, what exactly are we alluding to when we talk about fundamental movement skills or multi-skills? And hopefully then the lion's share of the presentation is how do we coach them and how would I approach this concept of multi-skills, both in a kind of generic multi-skill environment, but I know that many of us don't necessarily coach or teach in a multi-skill environment. You tend to coach in more sport-specific context, community sports clubs. And let's have maybe a think about how we can still include fundamental movement skills and movement skill coaching per se in those sport-specific contexts. And then maybe just indulge yourselves in terms of what that looks like in a performance elite sport as well. So that's the kind of game plan. I've got about 30 minutes to do that. So hopefully that's attracted your interest or stimulated your interest, and you're going to stay on for a wee bit while longer. All right, I'm just saying, is this moving? Yeah, so let's look at the fundamental movement skills and their importance. Many of you might be familiar with this slide, and basically I call this the passport slide. Children or young people or even adults have to acquire a range of fundamental movement skills such as catching, jumping, running, even the throwing techniques and the styles of breaststroke and swimming and basic running, which allows us to access a range of sports from association football, basketball, volleyball, athletics, so forth and so on. If we do not have these fundamental movement skills, then the challenge of participation, if you like, in more sport-specific contexts becomes a real one, a very difficult one. And sometimes the academics refer to this as being the proficiency barrier. If you don't have your ability to move or perform these fundamental movement skills, it's very difficult for you to play these sports well. In more recent times, if I'm going to flick this through, I guess we're looking at this concept of fundamental movement skills being the building blocks, if you like, which then leads on to those sport-specific skills, which then leads on to more specialist movement skills, which would be associated at adult sport and performance sport. Our youngsters would start to discover these skills in a fundamental movement skills or multi-skill environment. They would start to link, combine, refine in more sport-specific environments, and then select apply once they've actually specialized in a particular sport. It's a very simplified version of how multi-skills, if you like, fits into the continuum of that skill acquisition and development. But hopefully it's useful. My concern is that and most of our sporting cultures, we don't always give that opportunity for that multi-sport environment. Maybe some of our children are of more affluent backgrounds are able to access a number of community sports clubs in different sports. Others don't have that opportunity. And maybe there is, if you like, a culture where at a very early age, children choose a specific sport at the expense of experiencing a more generic sports experience where they could identify, where they could acquire and develop a greater range of sports skills, which would equip them much better for more informed choices in terms of what their adult participation would be. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. If there has been in more recent times this concept of physical literacy that's come onto the coaching and teaching horizon, if you like. Yes, if I hover my mouse, movement competencies are important, but also we've got to consider, how we, of the personal and social attributes of movement that need also to be developed, as well as that technical development. Alongside that are the motivational behavioral skills that our children desperately need to acquire and develop if they're really going to take advantage of sports participation throughout life. Inevitably, once you've got those in place, then you can apply to specific sports, the tactics of those sports, the strategies of those movements. But we now tend to think about, rather than this kind of passport analogy, we're looking at a much more holistic approach to movement development, which covers personal social attributes and behavioral skills as well. To help me when I'm trying to make sense of where I am at this, I tend to look at Margaret Whitehead's work on how she perceives physical literacy. And, as you can see from the images here, and I'm going to show you some live video footage of the kids that are actually in this caption. You can see the movement, the joy, the feelings of expressions and emotions that these kids are showing simply by moving and interacting in a space around hoops and cones. And just to reinforce that, I just love this shot. Children love to move. We need to get them to move. We need to get them to move in a range of directions. We need to get them moving in different ways, in different environments, with different people, but they need to move. Why? Because it's in a form of expression. It's a form of expressing our feelings and our emotions. And I think particularly what we're just coming out of, or still in, if you like, that concept of our understanding of the importance of movement and play, it's never more relevant and pertinent than it has been over the recent months. And we've got to be able to work with youngsters is be able to teach them to move and enjoy moving in a range of environments. And yes, the mountain environment, the river environment, the beach environment, the forest environment are not always accessible. And I guess it's up to us as coaches is to create those environments as much as possible within our artificial context. So that the environments that we operate in when we're coaching and teaching these fundamental movement skills needs to be variable, needs to be challenging, needs to be non-linear. I like to call it in my coaching a little bit messy, a little bit noisy. If these kids are really going to explore the joys of the movement and start to acquire and develop a range of movement skills. Part and parcel of that is sharing, caring, laughing, interacting, communicating with the people they're sharing that space with. And that's an integral part of, if you like, what we as coaches try to reinforce, encourage, develop, provide positive feedback on. Yeah. We want our kids from as early as possible to be able to maybe, if you like, start to evaluate and reflect how well they move, and that can be done, both by watching others doing a range of skills and seeing if you can copy or emulate, or it can simply by reflecting on their own performance and their own movement. And that's a tough gig when you're working with a 5, 6, 7-year-old, 25, 30 of these children in a confined space. But it's important that they start to realize and start to understand and appreciate what quality movement, I won't even say looks like, feels like. Feels like is probably a better adjective for me. So they start to then to develop their love of movement and their thirst and their hunger to improve. In that, as they start to develop these fundamental movement skills, as they start to develop this concept of physical literacy, hopefully they become more confident in who they are, and they're more confident in taking on challenges, and they want those challenges. They seek those challenges out, rather than being reticent, rather than being fearful, rather than being underconfident. And that's a tough role for the coach, to be able to create that safe environment for young people, children, and these are literally children, to be able to, if you like, explore who they are and what they are through movement. And whether that's going around hoops and cones, whether that's manipulating with equipment and feeling they have no inhibitions, they could try things. There's no right way to hold a rugby ball. There's no correct way at the minute to pass a basketball, as long as they're sending using body weight, they're using rhythm, they have an understanding of how they're using the floor, the gym floor, the pitch to make that movement, to make that skill. We've got to encourage this kind of variety of movements rather than giving them a set model, if you like, of how to throw and how to run and how to sidestep. And maybe then they get that kind of sense of well-being. And I kind of like this shot. And I know the close association that we have in terms of the health and mental well-being of our young people, and how that can be closely linked to the physical education and the sport experiences that they're having, or in this case, not having at the minute, and how that impacts on their general health and well-being. So I've given you a lot there, but hopefully, you know, this stuff is important, and this stuff is just simply more than offering a passport to be able to play basketball, or to be able to swim 25 meters, or to be able to do a forward row. It's really about this kind of development of the whole person, and equipping that young person in some ways to take on life. And we need to start that as early as we can, albeit in an appropriate and enjoyable environment. Okay, so, you know, what are these skills? I've talked to for about 5, 10, 15 minutes, God help me. No, it's just over 15 minutes on this. So I haven't really actually said, well, Stephen, what exactly are you talking about here? Well, you know, Jess and Dewar's definition or categories of fundamental movement skills is as good as any, and they would have adapted from Burton and Miller, they would have adapted from Galileo and Osborne and so on, and they would have adapted from Hayward and Getchko. But near as damn it, you know, we can categorize our fundamental movement skills into perhaps 3 categories: stability, object control, and locomotor skills. And again, Sergio alluded to this at the beginning of the webinar about the importance of stability skills. And I'm kind of a bit of a posture fascist. I like to talk about posture. I like to instill posture in young people, and whether that's sitting posture, standing posture. We know that our children, even from a very early age, are spent too long a day being sedentary, sitting at school desks. They have little opportunities even at lunchtime and playtime and even after school to really explore their movement and explore how they should be sitting and standing and moving and so forth and so on. And hopefully I'll give you an example in the video of how I like to, if you like, embed an habitual behavior which instills appropriate posture. You'll hear me talking about what colors your balloon. Can you imagine a helium balloon lifting you up by the ears, and how that stretches your tummy and stretches your back, and how comfortable you now are, and how more able you are to move if you have adopt that sitting or standing posture, and how that then can transfer into running or moving from side to side. I've rather imaginatively labeled the other categories in stability as coordination 1, coordination 2, and coordination 3. But hopefully they're self-explanatory, you know, uni and cross-lateral movements. So can you skip with 1 foot only? Can you skip with both feet? Can you skip with 1 foot, 2 foot and move directions and so forth and so on? Let's explore how we stop. Let's explore how we start. Let's explore how we accelerate, decelerate. And the optimum word is there is an exploration, you know, allowing our children the freedom to go into move into different directions, explore different levels of movement, high, low, medium, so forth and so on. Let's really give them an opportunity to find out about their own body awareness and spatial awareness by including turns, twists, spins, rolls in our movements, both in not just purely in a gymnastics context, but in a play context per se. Balance is important, but then how do we move into that balance, and how do we come out of that balance? There's a serious amount of learning in there. The object control is perhaps more familiar to us, you know, how we send a range of objects. I don't normally say a ball, I don't normally say a cricket ball or a basketball or a netball. I will talk to my children, when I'm in a multi-skill environment, about an object. So they don't have a preconceived idea of whether they should skim that object, slide it, roll it, kick it, punt it, strike it, so forth and so on with another object. They're able to explore that. How are they going to receive that object using their feet, their hands, or even trap it and stop it with another object already in their hands? Then you're into sending and receiving. Then you're into traveling with that object, whether it's using hands, feet, others, so forth and so on. The locomotor part of it, yes, it's moving from A to B, walking, running, but both using hands and feet in supine and prone positions. And I like to talk about, movement has rhythm. The great performers, if you like. And Gary, I can see Gary smiling in a minute. See, I'm going to mention a tennis player like Roger Federer that has so much movement, or a basketball player would be close to Sergio's heart, like Michael Jordan, that moved in rhythm, was able to, perform layups and sideways movements and running and pivots in rhythm. And if we can start to instill that rhythm in our young people, not only will they become much better at their movement, but they'll enjoy it and they'll feel it and it'll become innate. A series of jumps, hopping, 2 feet to 1 foot, 1 feet to 2 feet, incorporating different shapes, tuck shapes, star shape, pencil shape, incorporating stability within that, including apparatus, so they can go explore movement going in and around, over, through, along, so forth and so on. Oh gosh, there's a load of stuff in there. There's a load of stuff. And it gives, as I talk through it, I go, it's a tough gig doing for multi-skills, but it's so much worth it. And we can't ignore it. We need to pay attention for it, either in our multi-skills environments, but even more in particular in our sport-specific environments. So, Jessinger talks about this technical menu, if you like, but also says, right, we need to teach our children to be able to adapt their performance. So choosing and selecting appropriate ways of moving, if they're moving into different spaces, how they're going to send an object, and more importantly, coming up with their own solutions rather than just pleasing the teacher and the coach by a model that's been presented with them. And finally, from Jessinger, I love this kind of table of what they entitle movement concepts. So, understanding space, shared space, where they operate in that space, how they go forwards, how they go backwards, understanding force, if you like. How do I go fast? How do I go slow? How do I go in between? How much force do I apply on the sand or the grass or the wood as I move and interact in my multi-skill session? Is my movement deliberately smooth, or can I make it jerky? Can I make it spiky? What are the relationships that I have with my different body parts as I'm moving? And I'll show you a video in a second where, this is a tough gig to get our children to be really coordinated, their upper body limbs with their lower limbs while performing a task, which may be getting from A to B, sending an object, or traveling with an object, and so forth and so on. So that to me is kind of what we're talking about when we're looking at fundamental movement skills or multi-skills. All right, so that's the kind of theory out of the way. I'm just now going to go to kind of some key principles that I guess I work to. When I'm coaching and teaching multi-skills, I like the areas to be busy, variable, playful, shared, but safe environments. I need to incorporate multi-directional movements, multi-plane movements, whether moving straight perpendicular or moving what we call on the frontal plane from side to side, or around a rotation plane when we're practicing our spins, turns, and so forth and so on. I want to incorporate in all of my sessions different size, shape, weighted, colored objects to send, receive, and travel with. You'll see me in the videos I'm going to show try to develop the child cognitively so they can make sense of their movement. I know that Andy Abraham, another colleague of mine, Sergio's and Gary's, talked about brain memory in a brilliant I Coach Kids, I think recording, a YouTube recording, which gets kids to think about, well, I try to get children to think about stringing a number of soul skills together, which they can keep repeating. For them to do that, they have to be able to remember them, create an intention of doing them, and then allowing them in a playful way to do that over and over again. able to choose different movements, pathways, different ways of controlling and sending and receiving. Big thumbs up and a big pat on the back when they're creative, when they try something that has not been suggested to them, and maybe even completely original. Sometimes children really, really surprise you on what they can come up with. Providing that positive feedback for when they share equipment or when they work cooperatively together, when we know for 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, that can be so difficult because the whole world of a 5, 6, 7-year-old revolves around themselves and the people who they who want them to love, who they love the most, and they want that love back, are parents, family, but also their teacher and coach. And then finally, include spaces where children who may have a little bit need more time to move or need time to make decisions are given that through personalizing equipment or creating safe places for those children to operate in. So that's where I'm really coming from. So how do I do it? I'm going to try this, fingers crossed. This is, I think it was 2018, I coached quiz conference. I was given or thrown in a bunch of 5, 6-year-olds before who had never met. I basically, within 5 minutes, started coaching them. We're working in a badminton court space, and I'm going to hopefully demonstrate or show you how we introduce some locomotor skills to these children. Oh, didn't work. There we go. Let's see here. I'm going to try that again. Perfect. Is this coming through, Gary?
It is, yeah.
Is this
just loading now?
Making sense, Gary?
Skipping. Wait. Round. Go. 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 Stop. See if you can do this. Skip with one foot. Watch first. Watch first. Watch me first. Go. Try and skip with the other foot. Try and skip with the other foot. Stop. All fours. Go, 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 go. Round the hips, round the cones. Round the hips, round the cones. Stop. Make a bridge. Hold for elephants. 3 elephants. 1 elephant. 2 elephant. 3 elephants. Start running backwards. Let's go. Running backwards. Go, go, go. Running backwards. Running forwards again. Sidestepping. Round the hips, round the cones. Sidestepping, guys. Sidestep, sidestep, sidestep. What's your area? What's your space? Where are you working? Stop. Go at your corners. Go. Sitting up straight. Watch. See if you can couch as many cones as possible going round with your elbow. Touch with your elbow. touch with your elbow. What have I asked you to do? Shh. Listen. Touch your elbow against the cones. And what are you going to do with the hoops? Run round the hoops. Got it? Go. Off you go. 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 Stop. Touch with your nose. Touch with your nose. Go. Keep going. Keep going. Stop. This will hurt me. Touch with your bottom. Touch with your bottom. Go. Not easy at 57. Stop. To me, quick. Quick, quick, quick. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In front, guy. Okay. This is the task. I think you're so smart you can do it. Listen carefully, and I want somebody to tell me the whole task. First cone you come to, you touch with your elbow. The second cone you come to, you touch with your nose. The third cone you go to, you touch with your bottom, and then you keep repeating. Who can tell me the whole task? Not parts of it, the whole task. Soren.
First one, you touch with your elbow. The second one, you touch with your nose. The third one, you touch with your bottom, and you keep repeating.
Did you get it right?
Yeah.
Round of applause. Go, go, go. Round of applause. Go! Off you go! So it's much about listening skills and language, qualities. All right. All right. Huh? No, I don't think so. You're singing again. Again, back. Go, go, go. Stop.
Okay, so if I then go back, so you'll see from there a range of locomotor skills with stability skills, multi-directional, perhaps less on multi-planes. We didn't put too many turns and twists in there, but you can see the format. If I take you back to this slide here, and I talked about brain memory, how I'm giving a task, if you like, which requires sometimes 2, 3, 4, even upwards of 5, 6, 7 different actions. And then I'm asking the children to recite it back to me, in order for them to do. And this is what we mean about this concept of cognitively developing the children to create an intention of the movements, which then they can carry out, but more importantly, keep repeating by themselves in a play environment, choosing which cones to go to, which directions they can make, and so forth and so on. But you know that they're starting to acquire and develop and hopefully improve their movement. Is it worth? Is there time for another one, Gary, or shall I move on? Any thoughts?
I think how about we suggest, if anybody wants to watch the rest of the video, it's available on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/iCoachKidsWorld. I can put the link in the chat for everybody to have a look at. And then we'll just go on to the next part, if that's okay, Steve.
That's 100%. That's probably the way I was thinking things would go. 100% fine with that. Okay, so if that's what it could look like from a kind of multi-skill perspective, working at 5, 6, 7-year-olds, what could it look like at an older age group? And I'll just give you 1 or 2 suggestions. Unfortunately, I don't have any video footage of this. I have some video footage, but I haven't got permission to show it. Maybe this is something, Gary, Sergio, Barney, The next aspect of this project is to look at how we embed fundamental movement skills in these more sport specific contexts. And this is a kind of an example I do from the volleyball world, but it's basically a pinch. Tell me a coach that doesn't steal, pinch, swipe other people's ideas, and I'll tell you, I won't see a coach. I'll just see somebody who's not telling me the truth. But I've got a 9 by 9 meter area there. I've got groups of my players in the corners of this 9 by 9 meter areas, and I then start to ask them to move, if you like, into the opposite corner of this 9 meter area. And then I can start to progress this pretty quickly, looking at different types of locomotion, whether it's side steps, shuffles, skipping and bounding. And before I go on, this is very familiar to any invasion game setup, whether it's basketball, football, field hockey, netball, korfball. You'll see this kind of practice setup very, very often, particularly with young people's clubs. But if we can start to put more emphasis on the movements they're making and the quality of the movements they are making, I think it's time very well spent. So different types of locomotion as they move from one corner to the other. You can have them working at different levels, touching floor, spinning and traveling to the opposite corner. Traveling to the middle include a spin, a turn, a shuffle, and move to the adjacent corner rather than diagonally opposite corner. Going to the middle and maybe putting in a jump or an appropriate sport-specific skill, and then going to a different corner. You can start then to put in maybe more sport-specific movements, and depending on the nature of the sport. But essentially, you're still working on movement skills, still traveling on all fours, using prone and supine, revert to straight running at a faster speed. But this time, you can include a search out an incoming rudder to evade or sidestep. Use reverse pivots to evade or sidestep the incoming runner. Do similar stuff, but look at different pathways within that. And then you can put your object control in. And that object control doesn't necessarily need to be the sport that they're working on at that club. It can be, but sometimes it could be different. Another idea that comes across, tick and tag games, particularly in sport-specific environments, are very popular. We do this thing at Leeds Beck with our students. It's an adapted version of kabaddi. So I've got a player 1 who's on in the TIG. He or she either has to TIG player 2 and get back to the home before player 3 TIGs them back. Or conversely, player 1 takes player 3 and tries to get back to their home verse before player 2 gets there. And then if you've got mindful, if the coach is mindful when they're setting up this particular game or practice or whatever you like to call it, look at the movements that the players, if you like, are choosing to use. Maybe comment on them, the side steps, the pivots, the lunges, the acceleration, the deceleration, the turns, twists, and spins. Identify good practice, point it out, why are they moving? Why are they able to successfully TIG? Why are they able to successfully evade being tugged? And so forth and so on. You can then start to develop that repertoire of movement skills through very, very explicit coaching, albeit in a kind of variable play type practice. You're going to include some object control by bouncing a basketball, dribbling a hockey stick, so forth and so on. Even some racket skills, so forth and so on. It doesn't purely need to be stability and locomotor. And obviously the locomotor skills come into there. I kind of like to use these practices here, particularly with some of my performance athletes, where maybe I'd have them volleying the ball, but similarly, they may be kicking a tennis ball or throwing and catching. In this particular case, this child is of primary school age, but she was quite successfully in throwing a frisbee, keeping a hula hoop going, and kicking a football, as demonstrated by this case here. I think, finally, have we got time, Gary, for a couple more, and then we can open it up to questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does it look like from a performance level? I'm just going to show you a YouTube clip featuring Rhett Larsen, who's the strength and conditioning coach for the Netherlands women's volleyball team. And as you're watching it, it's a very short clip. I just want you to watch the expression in the faces of the athletes and tell me what you think. There's no sound to this, so don't worry. multi-directional, turns, spins, twists, moving backwards. Stopping and starting, sideways movements, lunging, insert acted. This is before an international match, by the way. And look at the athletes' faces. And I'm just going to let Rhett just explain what he's doing there, because I think it's important. Then we can open up the questions.
I'm a little worried that everyone thinks all I do is dance, because that is absolutely not the case. I was just having to tell them that according to social media, all I do is dance. We probably have done a dancing warm-up maybe 3 times this whole summer, but because I want it to be a special occasion. I want it to be something that gets them super excited. And I also don't want them getting used to it. I like that it's actually a little bit athletically challenging. They don't do it enough to get great at it. I know that the girls, if I have the rest of the girls laughing behind them, I know that we're cutting some tension. I love the fact that we're maybe distracting the other team a little bit, who's looking over at us, thinking that we're having more fun than they are and we're a little bit looser than they are. And I think if we can have even this much mental advantage over another team in that way, then it's worth it. I'll look like a little bit of an idiot if it helps us at all.
Aan het begin moet ik heel eerlijk zeggen dat we ook allemaal wel een beetje moesten wennen, hoor.
And I'll leave it there.